Wow, your fan club is here.
Hey.
Hello, I'm Axios' Kerry Flynn. I'm so happy you all could join us today. This is such an important conversation. You know, throughout the week, we're talking about the rise of women's sports. Finally, people are paying attention to women athletes, and not only that, women in media and broadcasting as well. And so we also wanted to talk about the 2024 Olympics. They're coming up so fast. So we have amazing collection today of athletes, broadcasters across the gamut of the industry talking about, again, the rise of women's sports and the road to 2024. So as you heard, I'm here joined by the incredible Nastia. We already heard about how many medals you have. I won't make you do a backflip right
Thank
now.
you. I didn't wear the right shoes.
We don't have enough time. We got to talk. What people may not know, I hope they do, is that you are an Olympian gymnast, but you transitioned to doing broadcasting, right? So walk me through that journey. I'm curious also, was it like always an interest of you to go from being interviewed to now doing the interviews?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me and everybody that's here. But I think for me, gymnastics was something that was like so second nature. For those that don't know, both my parents were gymnasts. My dad competed at the 88 games, won 2 gold and 2 silver medals. My mom was a rhythmic gymnast and world champion. So as the only child, I was born with a little bit of, I guess, gymnastics in my blood and some good genes. And they really didn't want me to do gymnastics. They wanted me to find something that I loved, and gymnastics was something that I loved, and I had such a passion for ever since I was really young. But for them, the biggest thing was really for me to find the passion. And so ever since I can remember, gymnastics is just something that gave me like so much joy, and also the obstacles, the good, the bad, everything. And as a female gymnast, it's a pretty short-lived sport. It's changed a little bit over the years, but I would say you typically peak when you're 16, and I was 18, almost 19 when I won the gold medal at the Olympics, and I was quote unquote old. And my colleagues at NBC now, but they were like, basically like I'm over the hill. And my dreams were being held together by tape. And I love to remind them that. And I'm like, that tape held up pretty well. I think for me, it was really about figuring out, what the rest of my life looked like. And for as long as I can remember, my dad really instilled that, gymnastics and in sports is really just a short time of your life. And no matter what you accomplish, you never know how far your gymnastics career will take you, but an education will stick with you for the rest of your life. And so going to school was super important for me and for my family. And so I think that was really what helped the transition of not letting myself, be defined by just a sport, and not obviously it was my whole life. So it was really hard to do that. But, I think living in New York, going to NYU, and just having kind of a whole different life outside of that was something that really made me almost not that I lost the love for the sport at all, but re-fall in love with it from a different way. And I think, the broadcasting side of it, I've always kind of said, I love being able to watch, any sport, but what you don't really always see is the behind the scenes and the stories, And in 2008, when I won, I remember you don't even know what's going on. In the moment that you see your name on the scoreboard and you're like, okay, I just won a gold medal. And you're like, wait, what? And then you have 20 seconds maybe to try to collect your thoughts and do an interview. And that's what the whole world sees and knows about you. And at the time, I didn't even have an Instagram. I'm really outdating myself here now. And so you really can't show your personality or anything. And so I think that's kind of was another reason why I really wanted to, be involved more in that.
Incredible. Well, I'm wondering too, with the skills you have from being such an incredible athlete, what do you think has translated to now broadcasting, right? Is there a certain thing that have innate in you from all your years of training that you bring to, again, being now in front of the camera in a different way?
Yeah, I would say, so I feel like I wasn't really supposed to be an athlete. I always joke about this because, I mean, I'm 5'3", but I was very tall. And I'm not like that powerful and strong or as strong or as powerful as a lot of my other teammates. And so I really had to work a lot harder on that side of things. But what I really try to focus on, because of, you know, the way my dad coached me too, was like the technical aspect of it. And so that's kind of what I'm always watching is, you know, if somebody falls off the beam at the Olympic Games, like, we all know that that's not good, right? Like a blind eye, like anybody could see and understand. Like, you don't need to harp on the fact that like your dreams are now over, you fell off the beam. Like, I always try to think like, okay, why did that happen? And from like a technical standpoint, try to maybe explain, was it technical? Was it nerves? What was it? And so I kind of think that putting myself back, you know, in the athlete's shoes and kind of that perspective is something I always remember, like, when I was younger, I tried to do watching some of my idols. And so I always try to explain that as opposed to like, that was good, that was bad. You know, like we kind of see, or like you kind of know by the scores.
Yeah, that sounds way more insightful, like as a viewer, like watching someone do that to actually understand what perhaps might have happened. So you mentioned it earlier, like back, you know, when you were competing, it was Instagram, you know, wasn't as popular, perhaps we'll say. You know, TikTok definitely wasn't around. So I'm wondering, you know, we're doing all these, you know, media, broadcast media is still a big component, right? Athletes still do interviews. At the same time, they have these tools where they can produce media themselves. They can give you this behind the scenes. What would you say are, from your perspective again, as an athlete, as like the pros and cons of those mediums now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pros are obviously, you know, you have a platform. And so to be able to use that platform for whatever it is that you want, and to have a voice. And I think, you know, so many incredible athletes are doing that now, and they have a loud voice. And sometimes, you know, those actions and that voice can speak much louder than any medal. And, you know, I think that's something that we have to remember, that we aren't defined by our accomplishments, a gold medal or not a gold medal or a placement, but it's really like what you want to be, you know, remembered for, known for, what's important to you. And I would guess, like, for me, I never, again, competed at the Olympics or on that level when I had like a TikTok or, you know, Instagram or whatever, but I can't imagine like the instant, you know, like for me, I had to like read an article, you know, to like read anything negative or positive, you know, and now it's just like somebody's feedback or comments or something could really affect, you know, you and your performance and mentally and physically. And so that's where I'm like, I don't know how they do that, you know, like I remember Olympic trials right before Tokyo, like we were on a commercial break on NBC and Simone was literally right in front of me, like in our booth, like standing right there and like trying to like talk to me. And then like my phone lit up and she's like responding to my, like a DM or like responds to like my outfit being like, love the fit. Like, and I'm like, you were competing at the Olympic trials. So I just like can't imagine like being able to do that. But that also goes to show just how extremely talented she is. Being able to like, yeah,
so much to literally juggle at the same time.
I'm like, why did my outfit should not matter to you right now? You were like literally, but yeah, she was just like, you know, above everybody else. And yeah, incredible.
Well, last things for you. I'm wondering, what would you say, looking back at the last Olympics, what was the biggest story? And I'm going to make you make a prediction. What do you think will be the biggest story of this upcoming Olympics?
Simone and Simone.
Easiest answer.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, again, when talking about, you know, somebody doing something that can, you know, spoke, in my opinion, way louder than anything, any gold medal that she could have won, was putting herself first, her mental health first. And I think that was like such an incredible moment that, you know, people don't really realize how actually dangerous the sport of gymnastics could be, and especially when you have what we call the twisties. So it's like very mentally challenging to do any skill when you have that. And yeah, I think, you know, I know a lot of people watch that play out, and, you know, she still, in my opinion, ended out on top, you know, and that doesn't, on top, I think we have to remember, isn't defined by how many gold medals you win. And I think, you know, if she's able to make this Olympic Games, which, you know, I know that I would like to think that that is her goal. I think that she will be, once again, the biggest story. And, there's also Suni Lee is trying to make the team again, Gabby Douglas. And so it's really, really cool to see so many of these athletes, trying to train and compete again and really proving that age and it is just a number, so.
Well, I wish we had more time, but like you said, we'll all be rooting for Simone and all the female athletes this coming Olympics. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
So I wanted to thank our incredible sponsor at Sparks. They're the only reason we're able to have all these conversations today. So thank you so much to the Sparks team. And now I'm going to hand it off to my amazing colleague, Sara Fischer.
All right, everyone. This is a fun conversation that we're about to have. And thank you again to my colleague, Kerry Flynn, for hosting that amazing conversation with Nastia Liukin. We are here with three of the most preeminent female journalists in sports media. We have with us today Holly Rowe, Elsa Garrison from Getty. You know Holly Rowe, ESPN, the queen of college sports. Elsa Garrison from Getty. And then TNT's Taylor Rooks. So this is a fun conversation because I am a journalist and I never get to interview other journalists ever. So this is very
interviews
fun.
because we never get to talk. We're always doing your job, so we're bad at this.
I kind of, first of all, you're not going to be bad at this. Second of all, I kind of want to talk about just how the sausage is made because I think people see you either on screens or behind the lens and they think, God, that's a cool job. They have it made, but they might not know some of the crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So maybe I would love to pose the question to each of you, like what's the one thing that you have to deal with as a part of your job that no one understands is a part of your job but actually is really hard? Maybe, Taylor, let's start with you.
Okay. I mean, I know you all can attest to this. I don't think people understand that we're basically on the same schedule as the athletes. Like ours is almost just as hectic and year-round when you're covering multiple sports. But I'll use Thursday Night Football, for example. Obviously, I have to work Thursday, but we're there Wednesday. But then I also do the features. So a lot of the time, I get there Monday or Tuesday. So during the football season, I may be home 1 to 2 days out of the week for a few months. And that's no complaints. I love it. I feel very lucky to be able to do the job, but it is absolutely more time consuming than I think people think.
And when you get home, are you like sprinting to catch up with the rest of your life, like laundry and getting ready for the next trip? What's that like?
Oh yeah, because on top of that, I work with TNT. So I'm also having to do episodes every month of the interview show. So it's certainly a sprint. I try to use the planes to catch up on books and my TV shows and my movies. So I love a good plane ride.
Oh, good life hack. All right, Elsa?
I use planes to sleep. That's pretty much where I get my best sleep. I think a thing that, like she said, like the schedule is crazy. We are like athletes, and your time is not really your own. But you get to, the event like 4 hours early if you're having a light day. But it's a lot of equipment that you're carrying around. Like so I'm going to the Women's World Cup next month, and so I will be gone 6.5 weeks because we're going a little early for some setup things. I am going to have, I would say, 4 cases of equipment in addition to 1 case of clothes. So.
And you have to carry that by yourself?
Yes.
Wow.
Well, I don't feel like mine is challenging compared to that, but humble brag, going to the World Cup for 6 weeks. I think my biggest challenge is access. So I work in a very unplannable situation. So, for example, where the end of the game happens and you literally don't know who's going to win. I can think of a very famous Alabama-Georgia game where it looks like Alabama's winning, then Georgia gets an interception late in the game. I'm on Alabama's sideline ready to run out and interview Nick Saban, and all of a sudden the game turns and Georgia's going to win. And so I am booking it over to the other sideline. I don't know what questions I'm going to ask because I don't know who's going to win, and I don't know who's going to be the star athlete. So I think planning on the go, and then you are literally navigating hundreds of other people that run out onto the field. So this will be my 29th year covering college football. And I will say, thank goodness there wasn't the internet early in my career, because I would be using my microphone like this, like just like trying to fight your way into these interviews. And I'm like, my God, if that was ever on video, that would have been horrific. But it happened for sure. I probably broke my microphone on occasion. But like just navigating that and knowing like, okay, I don't know who's going to win in the final seconds of this game. It came right down to it. Who do I interview? What are the questions? So it's really hectic at the ends of games and fighting your way through people, because as much as we try to evolve, it's never organized. Like still to this day, it's never organized. So you are fighting for that space to get to the coach, get to the interview.
Question, just a follow-up for that.
Okay.
When you were at the beginning parts of your career, I imagine it was even harder to navigate through those crowds and to book it through because you're not as well known. People don't know to part way for Holly Rowe. So how did you navigate it at that point in your career?
I don't think it's changed, to be honest with you, because even now, so I just did Alabama versus LSU. So LSU upsets Alabama. It's this huge deal. People rush the field. And I'm trying to get to Brian Kelly, to get to the coach. And, you know, I'm looking for the police officers. I'm like, if I can find his police officers, I can find the coach. People are drunk and excited and rushing the field. They don't care who you are. They're not paving the way for you. So you're definitely navigating. But I think those are the most important interviews, and I will die for those interviews because those are in the moment. Like Brian Kelly, I don't know how many of you are American sports fans here, right? So he's like this really straight-faced, you know, Northeastern, sarcastic sense of humor. He is not warm and fuzzy. And he cried. Like, he started crying after that win. And I'm like, what if I hadn't tried to get that interview? We lose that precious moment that never comes back. So that's why, I mean, I've done some work trying to get these, but I think they always pay off.
Totally. Taylor, to the point about, you know, crying, I think sports tends to be an incredibly emotional endeavor. And a lot of the times the subjects that you are interviewing maybe aren't as poised as the media CEOs that I am always interviewing, who are typically doing like earnings calls and business stuff. These are people who have worked their whole lives only to feel like they lost it all in a minute. So how do you deal with the emotions of some of your subjects while also maintaining a level of professionalism?
I mean, well, honestly, I love the emotion. Like, that's one of the reasons that I love interviewing specifically, is because you're able to see, you know, these athletes and these people that you watch doing one thing in a completely different way. So the more they can be open and vulnerable and talk about themselves just in different ways, that's kind of what I like to feed off of. Like, I care a little less about, you know, why you missed the free throw, and I care more about what it was like for you when you went home and everybody thinks you're the reason why y'all aren't going to the finals, right? That to me is just a bit more interesting. And I think too, the athletes enjoy being able to show that side of themselves. Because something that interviewing has really taught me is we allow narratives to become who that person is. And if you don't ask them anything outside of the narrative created for them, it's easy for them to become that, like even if that's not who they are. So I always want to give people that opportunity. So I'm all for the emotion.
Can I follow up
Yes.
on that? We had an interesting situation. So 2 years ago, this young athlete, Aaliyah Boston, she missed a little layup to win a game to go to the national championship. And she misses this shot. She can't believe she missed it. She plays for South Carolina and Dawn Staley, and she just dissolved into tears. And those tears and her crying were on every commercial, every promo, every video that got done about women's sports for the next year. So fast forward another year, and she wins the national championship. I'm going to cry just talking about it. She wins the national championship, and she does the interview with me, and she's like, Holly, you want tears? These are the tears, and look at me now, and they're because we won. And we had this really hard conversation with her about how she felt traumatized and victimized by people showing that crying. And I said, but the agony of defeat, the ecstasy of, you know, winning, the agony of defeat's part of our job. And she said, but it became the only narrative. No one ever talked to me about anything else except for me crying in that moment. And so she and I have vowed, she's now with the Indiana Fever. Their president is here, #1 draft pick. And she is tearing it up. She's fantastic. Aaliyah Boston, if you don't know her name, know her name.
Phenomenal.
But we
She's
have
awesome.
vowed as a journalist and a subject that I am going to give her grace. And if she's struggling this year in her rookie season, that's not going to be the narrative. We're going to give her room to expand her game and grow and not be lazy to your point with the narrative, media has a responsibility to dig further, not have that one tired trope be the story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure like you have realized this too. It feeds into the questions we ask, and it just doesn't even give them the opportunity to be anything else, right? And so I'm always trying to push myself to make sure you can see them as a whole person and not just the parts that we've created that we think is who they are. So that's a great story about Aaliyah.
I think both of those points speak to the aspect of also preparation. You don't just go to a game and cover it blind. And Elsa, you don't just go to a game and photograph it blind. You have to know every single backstory to every single player, to every single game, to know what's going to be newsworthy, interesting, and exciting. Elsa, I'll pose this to you first. How do you do your prep before you get to the game?
There's a lot of reading I do. I listen to like your interviews and just read stories about them. Also, I like follow the teams on Twitter. I'm just constantly doing my research on what motivates them, how they react to things, and just by covering the matches, covering the games, just to see how they respond to things, how they battle adversity, how they come back from a crushing defeat, and how that's what's great about sports is it teaches you resiliency and relentlessness and all those things that I admire in athletes. I kind of try and capture as I'm covering them.
Go ahead, Holly.
I was just saying, I love that because you don't just show up to shoot the event. You have to know when Megan Rapinoe runs to the corner and does this celebration, why that matters, and why is she showing off to the world? Because they're in this fight for pay equity, and she's showing them what we're worthy. Or if someone runs to the stands, you need to know who's that wife and why are they kissing in the stands. So, you have to know more of the backstory in many ways than the people interviewing because you get these glimpses of moments that you've got to quickly put context to.
Yeah, they don't happen. They don't last a long time. So you have to really be just watching and being aware of the arena around you and the people around you and just notice everything. I'm always just constantly darting my eyes around looking and looking for that, either that reaction or that. I'm really drawn to kind of reaction pictures because it shows the human side of sport, and that's what I really love.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, do you have that one photo that you're just exceptionally proud of?
I don't know. Well, she did mention the Rapinoe picture from the quarterfinals, and that was mine. That went everywhere.
Give it up for that.
So good.
So
I tweeted that one.
yeah. So there you go.
That's maybe one of the most iconic female images, athlete images ever. That's you.
Well, and then and then I.
No, that's very cool, and you should lead everything you do with that.
Okay, I'm going to pose the question then to the both of you. So if the photo that you're the most proud of is the Rapinoe photo, what are the interviews that the two of you are the most proud of?
Oh, those are good questions. I'm really proud of an interview that I did with Candace Parker. Just because she was able to talk about things I don't think she's been able to, like her relationship with Gino or lack thereof, how she feels about Team USA, and I just don't think she was asked to be able to expand upon how she felt. And so I'm always proud when somebody can get feelings off of their chest. So I always point to that Candace one. I point to one I had with AI just because it was a big moment for me. But I don't know, I feel like, when you watch your interviews back, you always say, I could have asked this there, I missed a follow-up. So I'm trying to be better at just appreciating them, but I always point to the one with Candace because I just feel like it was a good exchange of thought.
What a reflection of the athlete mentality that Elsa was just talking about, that you're always asking yourself, man, what could I have done better? That's exactly what athletes always say is, I could have done that better if I could go back in time. Holly, what are you the most proud of?
Oh, my gosh.
You have had a lot of iconic. post-game interviews. So I
really don't know. I would say some of them that have been the hardest for me. We had some really hard interviews during 2020, during the WNBA being in the bubble. And an interview I'm proud of is the women of the WNBA had shown up to work that night and found out that the NBA was not going to play their games that night because of another shooting of a black man in Wisconsin. And just so much heaviness and weight was already existing on those women, the fear for their brothers, their fathers, people that go out in public. And so I was there as they were kind of voting and deciding were they going to play that night. And I remember doing an interview with Ariel Atkins, and she's one of the most quiet players in the league. She's not a spokesperson. She's not someone who talks. but she was powerful. And I just remember, walking away and just kind of crying. You'll hear this a lot. I'm a crier. I'm sorry.
So am I.
The fear that they feel every day really struck me. And then the resolve to change things and be better and be beautiful and stand up for what's right. And her interview, maybe everybody hasn't seen it. It's not a famous one that I've done. But to me, it was the most impactful because it was in this really vulnerable, raw, real moment. And she was beautiful.
I love that you just said maybe people haven't seen it. It's, maybe not the most impactful or visible one you've done, because sometimes to get those really recognizable interviews or shots, it takes thousands of tries. Again, very similar to athletes. Elsa, when you capture a photo, like the Megan Rapinoe photo, how many times have you taken that picture? How many times are you clicking that shutter that you're filtering through to find that exact image?
I'm pretty deliberate in what I shoot because, I've done this for 26 years now. Holy cow. So the more you cover a sport, the more you know about it, and the more you can be very thoughtful in how you're capturing it and how you're what I always feel like is I'm documenting the history of sport of that day. And so I try and approach it with obviously the utmost care. These are human beings. They're giving their heart and soul for this, playing this match. And so what I want to do is I want to bring you, the viewer, into that, to share that journey with them. So that's kind of how I approach it.
Is there, just because now I'm curious, is there anything that consumers can do when we see these great photos to give credit to the photographer? Because I had no idea who took that photo, and it was everywhere. And so it's really cool to know that it was you that's responsible for this image.
I guess it depends on the publication that runs it. Sometimes they credit us well, sometimes they don't. So, that part's a little bit out of my hands. But I just, I still just do my job and try and get those pictures out quickly as well. So working kind of with a wire service, like something big like the World Cup, I have an Ethernet cable in my camera, and that stuff's delivered in real time. So, seconds after Megan, celebrated at the quarterfinals at PSG. It was out.
I always wondered how Getty gets those pictures so fast.
So fast.
We have just a few minutes, so I want to quickly ask all of you, what's the biggest change in your role as we've moved into the digital era? Obviously, with television, it's streaming. With photography, it's social media. But just quickly, Taylor, I'll start with you.
I would say the fact that I am now employed by Amazon, right? that Thursday Night Football is on Prime Video, I think really signals this new age of actually watching games while streaming and having the shoulder programming on there and people transitioning to this kind of second screen mentality. So, yeah, I think one of my jobs is just a product of this new digital age, and it's been really fun.
Elsa?
For me, I guess it's speed to delivery. Trying to get those pictures out quickly, whether I'm editing them myself or someone else is editing them. And as I'm shooting, I'm thinking of all the different ways that it can be used. So for social, I tend to shoot a little tighter. For other publications, I'll kind of think in my head, okay, I need a scene center. I need to kind of have a little wider picture. So I'm always constantly thinking of all the different ways it can be used and try and get those pictures out quickly.
Amazing. Holly?
I think my job's changed that I am a one-woman production studio. I have my phone, and you would be shocked by what I capture that makes it onto ESPN. I have had features run on ESPN that I've shot and edited by myself on my phone. I did a 15-minute feature for Uninterrupted in the bubble by myself. They mailed me a camera. I did a Zoom on how to put the camera together, and I shot all the interviews by myself, and it didn't really look that bad. The content was great, but, a 15-minute feature is huge, and it was on the advocacy of women in the WNBA. I shot the whole thing by myself in the bubble. I was really proud of that. But I recently took a video that has over 500,000 views right now, and it was just the Oklahoma softball won the World Series. Yeah, okay. And Toby Keith shut down his bar for them and performed on stage with the softball players. And he was performing this song, "How Do You Like Me Now?" And the players were all up there singing with him. And I just happened to capture that video, and it's got 500,000 views. Every other media outlet has picked it up. And it just has legs of its own by thinking like a photojournalist a little bit, but then having the ability to edit. I edit on iMovie on my phone. I can put features together. I mean, I'm like a one-woman band right now, and I think that's kind of how you have to be right now as a digital reporter.
I think it speaks so much to the misconception that people have of journalists and female journalists. You're not just a pretty face in front of the camera or behind the camera that lives this glamorous life. The way the sausage gets made is really hard, and it requires such a dynamicism from all of you. A few quick things that we've wrapped today. Use your plane time. If you are traveling a lot, to catch up on books or sleep.
Yes.
The scheduling and the traffic can be really grueling. Dragging 4 cases of equipment is something that I will think about every time I look at your pictures, Elsa. Holly, access can be really hard, especially last minute at a game, 100 yards, sprinting down the field to get that photo or get that interview is absolutely unamazing. You cited the Alabama-LSU game as an example of that. I love, Taylor, that you said, like, you have to capture the emotion outside of what's happening on the court, and it's our role as journalists to get the narrative right. I really appreciated, Holly, the example that you gave of Aaliyah saying how she was traumatized by that video going viral of her crying, not the video necessarily of her crying over the win, which is really hard to think about. Prepping for all of your interviews, material, reading, everything you got to do. Elsa says she listens to people's interviews. She's a photographer. And then, of course, the work that everyone is most proud of. Everyone follow Elsa on Instagram. All of these fine ladies on social media. But, of course, take a look at the Megan Rapinoe photo. Taylor, the Candace Parker interview, super moving. And then also, Holly, that NBA Bubble 2020 interview is super interesting because it's an emotional one, not necessarily the most viral. And how has sports broadcasting changed? I mean, Taylor said it. She's working with Amazon now. Elsa, I thought that was interesting that the social media photos have to be more zoomed in. I wouldn't have thought that. And then Holly, just being a one-woman production studio, capturing Toby Keith. How do you like me now? How do you like us now, guys? Thank you so much to this amazing panel.
Thank you so much.
We now have a View from the Top segment with Axios' publisher, Nick Johnson, and the lovely folks from Spark, Robin Liukin, the Chief Experience Officer. Come on out.
Yep. Hello. Thank you, Sara, as always. Good afternoon. My name is Nicholas Johnston. I am the publisher of Axios. Nothing that we do at Axios is without the support of our partners. And so let me start this off by just saying a huge thanks to Stagwell for making this possible. I do a lot of events, and this is the first one on a beach. I am sold on Cannes. This is awesome. And all the investments that Axios makes in journalism, the reporters I get to hire, and the conversations like this we get to convene would be impossible without our sponsors. So I'm very happy to welcome our partner to this stage today, Robin Lickliter from Spark, and Chen from Salesforce, the Vice President of Partnerships. Welcome to Stagwell Beach. So let's start off something that has been an undercurrent in almost every conversation on this stage, has been the fusion of technology and sports and how it is upending the sports industry and having games are played. So Kexin, let's start with you. Give us a sense from your vantage point, the role that technology is increasingly playing in sports and what are the cool things you see over the horizon?
Yeah, so at Salesforce, we've had an opportunity to be at the forefront of emerging tech. And so when I think about some of those technology advancements, AI is top of mind here and it's been fantastic. But I think I wanted to highlight just the rapid adoption of AI and how quickly it's taking off. So if you think about the telephone, it took over 75 years for 100 million users to use it. Talk about Netflix, it took 10 years for 100 million users. ChatGPT, it was literally 2 months to hit 100 million users. So everyone's thinking about that AI strategy. And for us, trust is our #1 value at Salesforce. And so we're looking at LA games as well as Paris 24 and Team USA. How can we be their partner in terms of bringing AI, but using trust as the forefront?
We'll get to the Olympics in a second, but I wonder if you could dig in more just about the speed of this. Like, it's literally, we're measuring it in months now. And can you bring it a little bit into the real world of like how this is beginning to impact the way fans engage with athletes, the way athletes engage with fans, the way viewers engage with the spectacle of it all?
Yeah, so I think about a lot, and you look at that demographic that's growing in terms of learning about the athlete's personal journey and their backstory. And so what we really want to be able to do is using AI, personalize that experience. And with generative AI, imagine it's no longer about just the right message at the right moment. You can actually create hyper-personalization with individualized, personalized AI curated content generated at the time that person is most interested. And so like, for me, I wake up very early in the morning, I have kids, and I wake up and read my information at 5 a.m. I read the news then. So imagine if AI knew that and they were able to actually generate me and my information about what I love about Team USA right then and the specific
and
athletes I
deepen
follow.
that connection that a fan already would have.
Exactly.
With that. And so like now I want to pull it from the digital world into the real world. And Robin, tell us a little bit about what Spark does and how this can translate into like the physical experience with.
Yeah, sure. So Sparks is a global experiential marketing agency. We've been partnering with Salesforce for 6-7 years now. And we bring these brand experiences to life both in IRL as well as digital spaces. So it's anywhere where a brand is essentially creating that experience and coming into that cross culture.
And so how do you navigate that? What does it mean? Like when you say when we take it from digital to the in real life, like what are some of like the physical places where you do that? We mentioned we were talking earlier, like how do you create those physical spaces and what are they like?
Usually starts with a client brief. But it can be a number of different, I mean, this is a brand experience as we sit here right now. So there's a number of different ways that we bring clients to life. Some of the work that people might be familiar with in this audience is our recent Mick Ultra launch at Art Basel this year, which was super successful. We created an LED basketball court, which was super cool, and introduced a bunch of artists and NBA cams.
So what I want to take now from, okay, you mentioned Art Basel, so I laid up that question perfectly. What's interesting is building these experiences around tentpole moments. So Cannes is one, Art Basel is one, and thinking about what is essentially the largest tentpole moment is the Olympics and the Paralympics. And so we've talked about where we've been. Spin it forward, what is cooking for next year on this massive global scale?
So the Olympics and the Paralympics by far are the world's largest stage. I think that they are an extremely emotional event that takes place that the entire world participates in. Anybody in this audience who has not cried at the Olympics is lying. Everyone has always shed a tear during the games. And what we're seeing now with Paris 24 is that the Olympics has a new moment. It's the first post-pandemic time. The Olympics are coming back, and it will be a live experience. We're, expecting 4 billion viewers for Paris, and it's a really, really amazing opportunity for Salesforce to bring their brand to the host city for the first time in their Olympic and Paralympic sponsorship.
Right, so what is sales? I know you're not going to tell me everything, but here's a chance to start teasing, looking ahead. It's what is on the Salesforce agenda? As we put this experiential thing in, who knows in 12 months where this generative AI is in? What is exciting over the horizon for the Olympics?
Yeah, so in particular with Sparks, we're really excited to activate, and this is, like you mentioned, the first time in the host city, and we're going to be hosting over 400 customers in that time span very quickly, and so just really excited about that big splash with Sparks. And then in terms of what we're also doing more related to AI, we're actually powering Paris's 24 fan portal, Lickliter. And so with that, we're able to, using that fan portal, build specific fan profiles related to who they like, the teams that they follow, the athletes that they follow, and then be able to build predictive, hyper-personalized content related to that and make sure that we're engaging them at the right time.
That also is the key to these global moments, is that personalized, authentic experience for everyone. The shinier, bigger things, that's not what people want anymore. They want that personal, authentic connection, and Le Club is a great opportunity for Salesforce to bring that to Paris.
This is the exciting thing that's coming then. When you think about a global opportunity, what's hardest to do on the Olympics is make it feel like your Olympics. If you're able to layer generative AI on that, that's when you bring it in and people feel that kind of connections. Is that what you're leaning forward, checking on the?
Yeah, so more of that personalized recommendation and using that to curate the content. I also think another thing that's really interesting that we're doing is when you look at some of these specific games that are relative or sports that are relatively new, like breakdancing, for example, what we want to do is build upon that story using data. So we use Tableau, our data visualization tool, to tell that story and be able to explain the scoring for breakdancing in particular, or it could be also for team optimization, such as sharing athletes' biometrics data and how they're performing. So it's going to be leveraged in quite a few different ways.
So this is an exciting, so much of the AI conversation is about how robots are going to come to life and murder us. Until they do that, at least we'll get a couple good Olympics out of it. That's super fun and fan. We're about to get the hook here, but an Axios trademark is to end on one fun thing. Today we're going to end on one can thing. Kexin, you've been to many can. Give us the hot tips how to survive the next 2 days.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I've been wearing wrap dresses every day, and it's been incredibly windy, which has not been a new experience. It's a new experience. So I have to actually safety pin my dress together.
Oh.
That has been my hack of this week. Or just don't wear wrap dresses.
All right, Robin, your first can. What is your takeaway so far?
This blazer was regrettably a bad idea for stage on a beach.
All right, two things to walk away from. Safety pins for windy days and leave your coats at home. Both of you, thank you so much for being here
Thank
today.
you,
Thanks
Nick.
for being a part
Thanks
of
so
Sports
much,
Beach,
Nick.
and thanks for making this conversation possible. I'm going to welcome my colleague Sarah Fischer back up on the stage.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Nick, who's so awesome for doing these interviews. I'm roping him into all my edits today. Thank you. I am so lucky to be joined by Molly Solomon, who is the executive producer of the Olympics for NBC Universal and of all golf across NBCU's properties. So that includes the Golf Channel, but then golf as it lives on all of its other networks. So, wow, you've had a busy year.
I've had a busy week. Not many people get to go to the U.S. Open golf tournament and then go to Cannes. And then Pebble Beach in 2 weeks for the U.S. Women's Open.
Oh.
It's a good run.
I can't even, we were just joking that Molly must have the craziest airline status of all time. Okay, so let's talk about the US Open real fast. And I don't want to get too far into it because this is really about the road to 2024, but it's a big thing in the news, obviously. I'm curious how this Live PGA merger, how are you thinking about that from a coverage perspective? We had Jim Bankoff, the CEO of Vox Media, on the stage the other day, and they're filming full swing as this is going on. So he offered his thoughts. Would love to hear how you're thinking about it.
First of all, from a partnership perspective, because NBC and Golf Channel are one of the partners with the PGA Tour, we don't have much information yet, right? When they announced this partnership, there wasn't a lot of detail around the framework, so I think like most people, we're waiting to find out more. But then from a news coverage perspective, Golf Channel has been covering Live and the controversy extensively, and when it was announced, we were on the air for 8.5 hours, commercial-free. So it was wall-to-wall coverage, and you know, as news breaks, I mean, shoot, Saturday night at the U.S. Open, the tour announced that all of the lawsuits had been dropped, and we're reporting on that during the U.S. Open. So we view it through two different lenses, but we know that we're covering that news. But we're all curious, I think, what it means for the world of golf. But I will say, ultimately, when the world's best players are playing together, it's better for golf and golf fans.
And it's, I'm sure, going to be amazing for Golf TV and Golf Media. So let's talk about why we're here. It's amazing that we're here in France because the next Olympics is going to be in Paris, the country where we are right now. And that is such a different mood, Molly, than what we've experienced for the past 3, where we had an Olympics that was in China, where we were thinking about the pandemic, mostly producing for you, I'm sure, in a bubble. It was during a time of great sort of economic and geopolitical stress. Mm-hmm. Paris feels a lot lighter. It feels a lot more summery and fun. We're going to get to see a lot more of the actual country, I presume. What's that going to be like?
Well, when I walked into Cannes a couple of days ago, I felt like there's so much energy here. Can you imagine if you multiply that by 1,000 and take it to Paris? So this got me excited about everything that's going to happen 13 months from now. Well, I think you mentioned the last few Olympics, and they were different than what we all fell in love with the Olympics, which is this festival of spectacle, stadiums filled with fans, the joy, the glory, nations coming together, and it didn't feel the same. And so what Paris has planned is actually going to be pretty extraordinary. And so when we say it's going to be lighter, I think it means that it's returning to normal. but even better because it's in Paris. And I think as we've learned about the plans, it's just going to be a unique Olympics. In some ways, it's similar to London 2012, if I have any Olympic fans out there. They're going to use the backdrop of the city. All of the historic landmarks are going to be venues. So imagine that first you kick off with the opening ceremony, and it's going to be an open-air ceremony attended by 600,000 people. I mean, that's a record. But the athletes are going to float down in boats towards the Eiffel Tower, and they're going to build a very intimate stadium outdoors at the base of the Eiffel Tower and light the cauldron. So it's a one-of-a-kind kickoff to the Olympics that I think is going to bring people into the games because it's just going to be spectacular.
Even just hearing the imagery of sort of float down in boats makes me feel like this is the Quidditch Cup in Hogwarts. It's so magical. So walk me through, though, the difference between doing something in Paris, which is just 6 hours ahead of the East Coast, where you all are based, versus maybe, Pyeongchang or Tokyo, which is a full half day ahead, of course. How do you produce it differently?
That's what I love. I've worked in the Olympics. This will be my 13th Olympics. And the fun part is reinventing it. So it's like you're playing cards and somebody throws down a card and says, your time difference is 6 hours. You're like, okay, what can we do with that? And so in Asia, it meant that live events were in the morning and at night, which I think were a little confusing to the American viewer. Like, where can I find what I want? But 6 hours ahead of East Coast means that the entire day in Paris will be live over here in the United States. So that really affords us to be able to build momentum all day long with live events. And so what we've decided to do is really a network takeover of NBC during the day. So out of the Today Show at 9 o'clock, NBC is going to come on from 9 to 6 weekdays, and that means the biggest and best events are going to be on NBC and Peacock. That also makes it easier for the viewer, because when you broadcast the Olympics, there's something like 7,000 hours we put on, and we always hear, how can I find what we want? Well, now we're able to tell people it's all going to be on Peacock, and also the most popular events are going to be on NBC from 2 to 5 o'clock, because that's in the heart of the competition day. Over here in Paris, and it's also the heart of the afternoon. So we're going to take our primetime host, Mike Tirico, and he's going to host the afternoon show as well.
Then what happens in primetime if you're pulling Tirico in?
He continues to work.
Oh, my
God. If you
God.
know Mike Tirico, he's going to love every minute of it. But so you can see the time zone really plays into comprehensive coverage and really reaching people and building that momentum all day with storylines. And then you ask, what do you do in primetime? Because at 8 o'clock, our primetime show is where I would say, I think it's 2/3 of our audience actually watches primetime, because y'all come home from work and you're like, oh, wait, the Olympics are on. And so now that gives us the chance to really build the most compelling best of show from the entire day. And people that know television, that if you give us 3 to 6 hours of turnaround time, we can do some really great stuff. So it's going to be the best of the best. It's also going to have more, I think, context, more analysis, more behind-the-scenes access, state-of-the-art technology in a really dynamic packaging. So I'm really excited to see what our team's going to do.
What do you mean by best of the best? Does that mean you're like mostly showing people winning golds? Does that mean you're showing the most emotional interviews? How do you decide what's best of the best?
The best stories. And on any
Best
given
story.
day, it's a final. It's potentially, I mean, you just don't pick gold medal stories and put them on, because sometimes the runner-up finish, like winning a medal in the Olympics is a victory unto itself. And we've always tried to stay away from just focusing on gold, because becoming an Olympian is an honor, and winning any medal really is a victory.
How do you figure out, like we asked Holly, who's in the crowd, Elsa and Taylor before, about how they prep. How do you figure out what are going to be these compelling storylines? How far ahead are you starting to do the research on these athletes?
So to get into the nitty-gritty, Sarah, since you asked, NBC Sports, and actually dating back to ABC Sports under Roone Arledge in the 60s, hired Dick Ebersol, who is my mentor many, many moons ago, as the first Olympic researcher for the 68 Grenoble Games. And ever since then, both ABC and then NBC Sports has hired a couple of kids out of college every 2 years to be Olympic researchers, and was really considered a great entree into the world of sports, sports journalism and sports television. So I was hired out of college in 1990 to be one of the two 1992 Olympic researchers. My predecessor, do you know who it was in '88?
Tell me.
Jeff Zucker.
Oh, my goodness.
And Sam Flood, who's our executive producer at NBC Sports. So we've all kind of stayed in media. But what they did is they gave two 22-year-olds credit cards, and they sent you around the world for 2 years to interview athletes and collect the information, because this will age me, but that was pre-internet in 1990, right? So how do you know about a Russian, oh, well, not at that point, but how do you know about a Polish wrestler who's going to win gold? How do you know about the Romanian eights team? Well, I would go sit in hotel lobbies at World Championships, pull people over and talk to them. And I like to talk to people. So it was the best job. But you get all these storytelling materials to put together hundreds upon hundreds of athlete biographies. But also important, you have to handicap all of the races. So our announcers, when they get to an Olympics, will receive, well, now it's links, but it used to be 8 different volumes of information, and so they could go, oh, women's 100-meter freestyle and swimming, they could read about all the contenders and then do their own homework. So everybody is on the same page. So information is power, and in the Olympics, it's so essential because our job is to bring unknown athletes to life, and the only way you can do that is telling the audience more about them so they find one little reason to care about them and root for them.
What's an example of an athlete that the masses would not have known about if it were not for NBC's coverage? And maybe it's not somebody who won a medal, but somebody who had a great story, to your point.
You know, oh gosh, there's so many. Now you're putting me on the spot, Sarah. I'm going to think about this. A lot of times it might be like a coxswain on a rowing team, like giving a person one small detail. But a lot of times it's not a person that's going to win a medal. It might be, you know, a swimmer from Algeria that swims in an early heat that has a great story that we'll focus on. Because the Olympics is about determination, grit, and just getting there. And so we search out the best stories, not just the best medal stories.
I love the just getting there. I mean, that really emphasizes the point that it's not just about who medals and who wins. It's about who puts in, to your point, the grit and determination. Let's talk about what you said in terms of preparation, that, you know, before you were in a hotel lobby, now there's links. It's a very different world, a different digital world. Again, something we spoke about on the last panel. You mentioned that so much of this is going to be available on Peacock. How do you have to think about programming differently, or maybe you don't, for the streaming era and the social media spoilers era?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So I would say what streaming offers us is really limitless, which as a producer and a programmer, I love, because there's room for everything. And so the way that we've designed Peacock for Paris, is that it's the ultimate destination for viewers, because everything will be there, but in a very curated way. So if you're an avid, you're going to find what you want. Say you want to watch the swimming prelims, but if you're a casual, you're also going to get what you want. So for example, all of our networks will be simulcast on Peacock. All the cable networks will be simulcast. So you've got the casuals can go and watch the primetime show, but also the avids can go watch the 5 different wrestling mats and go watch their favorite wrestler. So you're super serving all of them. But then we also wanted to put some really creative original programming on Peacock, and this is my favorite part of my job. But Chris, I can't tell them everything just yet. Shoot, my favorite thing I can't tell you. Okay. There's something really good coming up, Sarah, on Peacock, but you know, there's things that we dabbled in Tokyo, like with comedy, with with Kevin Hart and Snoop Dogg, and those were real successes. So I think you're going to see things like that, and we've got some other really great stuff in store. So we're able to super serve, but also make sure everybody feels satisfied, and it's also easy curation, because there are so many hours of the Olympics, and one of our big initiatives is to make it easy for the consumer and the viewer.
7,000 hours, that's absolutely wild. So on the social media front, pivoting to a different side of tech, last Olympics was the first Olympics that I felt like we got a whole new stream of content from the athletes themselves, recording their TikTok experiences of what the meals were like, what the social aspect of the Olympics were like, and I don't think that most of us have ever really seen that angle. How do you take that type of footage and bring it into your coverage?
We think it's super important that the athletes are generating content, and we're encouraging it as we're talking to the athletes at national championships, at world championships, because the desire for Gen Z and millennials is to get that authentic athlete experience. So they may not want to hear from me, but they do want to hear from Sara, Fischer, the swimmer. So we're encouraging that. I think the IOC is. And then we're also incorporating that into our coverage. Because I think that's, as we watch more docu-reality series, you talk about Drive to Survive, Full Swing, those Hard Knocks. People love to go behind the scenes. They love to go behind the closed doors. So we're really pushing at the Olympics to go places people have never gone before, to see the athletes warming up, to see and hear that moment. And I think you're going to see more behind the scenes access in our coverage as well, state-of-the-art technology, more of the why behind it. But I think athletes using their voice to tell their stories should be incorporated into more sports coverage. So I think that's one of the innovations you'll see in Paris.
I love this thought about your voice. Again, harkens back to what we were just talking to about how athletes' narratives are a really important part of this experience. So at Axios, we like to end all of our stories and our newsletters with one fun thing. And so I have a one fun thing for you, which was I felt like the last Olympics, we had a crazy new sport in the monobob. Every year there's like a new crazy sport. What is this new big thing that we should be looking out for in this year's Summer Olympics?
Okay, I'm not going to give you one thing.
Okay, give me a bunch.
Okay. So in Tokyo, they introduced a lot of youth sports, urban sports, skateboarding, BMX freestyle, surfing, 3x3 basketball. And I feel as though they didn't get a chance because the crowds, weren't in these intimate arenas with music blaring. So I love the fact that we're going to get a restart on all of those sports. And first of all, surfing is in Tahiti, if you didn't know, in Paris. I mean, that's the ultimate. So let's start with the first weekend in Tahiti after that opening ceremony. But then what they've done at the Place de la Concorde, which is at the end of the Champs-Élysées, they're creating an outdoor urban sports arena for skateboarding and BMX and 3x3. I think it's going to be a fabulous scene that it's going to be contagious. And then did you know what the new sport is?
Walk us through.
Breaking.
Breaking.
Breakdancing is in the Olympics. And actually, shameless plug, if you come down the street to Freewheel, Sunny Choi, the U.S. national champion, is going to be breaking with our NBC presentation later. But it's just this convergence of music, culture, youth in the Olympics. I think it's going to be super fun second week of the Olympics.
Thinking about that convergence, what you just said about the culture aspect, it really speaks to making sure that the athlete's version of the story is told, that you see the behind the scenes, where they grew up, how they view all of these successes. Let's just do a quick recap of some of the stuff we learned. Thank you for commenting on the Live PGA merger, because I'm so excited to see not only how you cover it, but also just how it impacts coverage writ large. Thinking about Paris, you said it will have 1,000 times the energy that here a Cannes has, which is absolutely wild to even imagine. The schedule is going to be really fun. So 2 to 5, we're going to have Mike Tirico doing a lot of the fun stuff live. Primetime is the best of the best storytelling, which we're so excited about. 2/3 of your audience is coming in on primetime. But if you miss something, we're going to have all of the coverage on Peacock. 7,000 hours of coverage, people. That's going to be a lot of Olympics. When we talk about some of the fun things about your history and doing what you do, I did not know that Dick Ebersol was one of your mentors.
Yeah, and he was the first Olympic researcher.
The first Olympic researcher, and I also did not know that you and Jeff Zucker...
Wait, because you're from Washington, do you know that Danny Goldman, the representative from New York City, started as Olympic researcher?
I did not know.
I hired him. Yeah.
Love that. Well, you're also
Crazy
kind of
work.
Washington. You went to Georgetown, so you know. Some of the exciting things to be looking out for on Peacock, it's going to be really curated. So if you're an avid fan or a casual listener, works either way. And then finally, the urban sports outside the Champs-Élysées, coming back to some of the urban sports that we didn't get such a experience with in Tokyo, surfing in Tahiti and breakdancing. This is going to be a fun summer 2024. Molly Solomon, thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you again to Robin and to the folks at Sparks for making this conversation possible. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Thanks for staying even though it's hot.
Thank you so much for the Axios team. Really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sport Beach 2023, how we feeling? Doing all right? Good, good,
I
good.
know it's
Home
late.
stretch, yeah.
If the heat is out, are you having a good time still? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, we have one more session today. Very excited to be bringing up onto the stage a great group to discuss. This is an interesting one, Damien. Sports as diplomacy and how to play the risk and opportunity.
Please welcome from the Atlanta Falcons, my man,
Yes.
Mac Hollins, who happens to not only be a wide receiver, but also an ambassador for the Special Olympics. John Gersma, the CEO of the Harris Poll. Jennifer Holleran, the CMO at Mass Mutual. Lisa Eichberger, the CMO of Ring Central. And our moderator, Stagwell Chairman and CEO, the man, Mark Penn. Come on up.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we're going to do a little exploring about what's been labeled sport diplomacy, okay? I don't really know why they labeled it sport diplomacy. We're going to talk a little bit about, how you wend the risk and reputation out there, particularly when it comes to issues, in sports. And as such, I think it'll be a pretty interesting topic. I've got a great panel. Maybe you'll each introduce a little bit yourself as we go along. Mac Hollins, who's, I think, probably the big draw for the panel myself. Okay.
Definitely.
I'm going to ask you first about, look, you went from a walk-on to the Super Bowl. Just give us a little background on your journey. This panel is about risk. What were some of the risks that you took in that journey? And we'll start off and everyone will in this first round, introduce yourselves to the group, and we will take it off from there. Mac.
Well, first off, I want to thank you, Mark, for setting all this up. This has been incredible for me, for my wife who came. It's such an amazing experience meeting everybody on this panel as well as others. But my journey started in Rockville, Maryland. I'm one of 3 boys. So Dad ran a tight ship with all boys in the house. I'm the middle child. My older brother's in finance. My younger brother's a Marine. And I chose sports as my kind of gateway. I ended up walking on at North Carolina. And before I got to North Carolina, my dad said you can go to the military or you can go to school to play football or go to school, but you're not staying on the couch. So I decided I would go play football. So walked on, and 2 years into my time there, I was able to get a scholarship. But I think the biggest risk in that moment was I told myself in 2 years, if I don't have a scholarship, I'll go somewhere else where I can get one. So it almost forced me to attack every day of, hey, if I got to get this scholarship, got to get this scholarship. And then I was able to 2 years later, and then I look 3 years later, I'm a Super Bowl champion, which is one of the coolest experiences of my life. Yeah. So I was able to take down the great Tom Brady, or the team was, but he still has a few more than me. But it was amazing, and life's full of risks, and football is full of risks, and business is full of risks. But I guess you learn how to get comfortable in those risks. The more you do them, the more you take shots at things, the better and more willing you are to do more of them.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of your work with the Special Olympics?
Yeah, absolutely. So Special Olympics has been a big part of my life since I was young. I had a neighbor growing up who was a Special Olympics athlete. I had my best friend in college. His brother was a Special Olympics athlete, so I was always going to events. And then all of it really culminated in 2019. I got an opportunity to become a Special Olympics champion ambassador, where I was able to do a lot of things with inclusion, the inclusion revolution, education. And I honestly didn't know much about the education side of the Special Olympics. I thought it was all sports, and they do amazing sport work, but I learned how much they do for inclusion and unified champion schools and bringing those with and without intellectual disabilities together. And it's been such an amazing ride. And the World Games were this week in Berlin, and it's been so amazing to be a part of that.
Fabulous. Jennifer, maybe give us a little insight into your work as CMO of Mass Mutual, and particularly the community responsibility work that you're leading.
Thank you. So I've been at Mass Mutual about almost 7 years now. They hired me to rebrand a 175-year-old company, and mutually owned, which means that we are super conservative and not public. So a lot about the opportunity to bring a new brand in and teach an organization what brand is. And I also have the good fortune to run our foundation. And we have a couple of programs that are national programs. We focus on financial literacy for children and economic underserved communities. So we have a lot of great work out there right now. We have something called a Live Mutual Project, which is where we work with areas across the country that they call financial deserts, which means there's no banks and no financial institutions in there. And basically, they're at the mercy of payday loan vendors. And really, it's a tough place to get out of economically or even prosper when you can't find anyone to cash your work paycheck every week. So we work with each of those communities. We bring social capital and financial capital together. We don't have the answer. Every community's got a different problem, but we help them get some sense of financial institution that will support those really low-income communities, because they'll never be able to break out of it. So we're really proud of that work.
Thank you. John, you're CEO of the Harris Poll. I know you've got some research that you're going to be releasing in a day or two. Maybe you can give us a little preview without the numbers of what you're finding out there when it comes to sponsors and politics.
Sure, Mark. One of the things that we've seen in our new Axios Harris Poll 100 is a fatigue in speaking out on social issues. And it's not to say that ethics and values aren't important in corporations, but what the public is saying is they actually want companies to prove it before they say it. And they've felt over the past year that a lot of companies have been aggressively sort of, whether you could call it virtue signaling or over-aggressively advertising, whether it's greenwashing or other things. And so the public has gotten a little cynical. 67% of Americans, Mark, say that when companies speak out on social issues, they think it's a marketing ploy. And that's up 12 points from April. So it just shows the work that we have to do to actually do
It's a good thing that Sport Beach is not a marketing ploy.
Without a doubt.
So you're gonna be revealing that in a day or two. We're gonna push you a little bit more.
You bet.
Lisa, you're Chief Brand Officer at Ring Central. Maybe you want to just give us a little insight into what you're seeing out there relative to responsibility. I think kind of the whole nature of the videos that Ring Central has created a whole new kind of almost surveillance product. And I don't know if that's
actually, I'm with Ring Central, not Ring.
Ring,
Ring Central. Different brands.
We'll take that.
I'm SVP of Corporate Marketing, and we actually do unified communications as a service.
Absolutely.
I do
apologize.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a common challenge. I oversee our ESG practice, however, and it is really important to us that we're helping bring communication to people in places where maybe they don't have it. And prior to Ring Central, I oversaw brand marketing for Farmers Insurance. And one of the things about Farmers that I thought was so amazing was we had a huge presence rebuilding homes and helping communities after Hurricane Sandy, after various initiatives that had nothing to do with our coverage. It was homes in communities, regardless if they were insured or not. We sent volunteers in along with other volunteer organizations to help rebuild homes. And I think when you talk about putting your money where your mouth is and it not being a marketing ploy, we actually never promoted it at Farmers. We just did it. And now I think they really have permission to talk about it if they want to in a very authentic, real way. And that when I look at kind of good examples of how to mitigate risk, and coming from insurance, that's obviously something that was always important to us. But mitigate risk in how you are perceived, doing it first and then talking about it is really the best way to go about it.
And what are you focusing on at Ring Central in terms of ESG?
Yeah, we're focused on a lot of things. Making sure that we have diversity within our own workforce. The tech space in Silicon Valley, it is very white male dominated. So one of the things I personally have focused on is building up more female leadership within the organization. We're focused on making sure that people have access to phone service. We sell phone service as part of phone video messaging. So making it affordable for small businesses, bringing more people along. And then just the overarching kind of different aspects of environmental, social governance. I mean, video conferencing clearly helps lower carbon footprints. People don't have to get in a car, they don't have to get in a plane, they can just get on video and have the sort of communication we used to have face-to-face that we now do so often over video. So
Sure.
environmentally.
So obviously, politics and sports are colliding. Next to AI, it's probably one of the bigger topics here. Is this creating a risk, an opportunity, or something else? Maybe start off with Mac on that one.
I think it's more of an opportunity. As an athlete, I think you build a following and you become a role model for kids and adults as well. And you have a responsibility to speak up or hold a stance for something. That doesn't mean you have to be as public as some people have been. It doesn't mean you have to go out and tell people vote for so-and-so or vote for this way. But being able to say, hey, this is what I believe is not a problem. I don't think you should feel fear in doing that. But you do have a role, whether you like it or not, as an athlete with a following and a lot of people watching you every week or every day, to speak up about things that you feel are unjust or might not fit your narrative.
All right, Jennifer?
Yeah, I actually think it's a good thing. I think that, similar to what you're saying, we as a brand, we work with these teams or leagues or athletes, and we know that they have an opportunity with a huge following, which is why we follow and we invest in supporting sports. And if you can make an impact, like you're saying, and speak up about things that are important, you have a large base, and it can be for the good. And like you said, sometimes it doesn't need to be said or done differently, but I still think, these athletes are their own brands, and if they have a way to show their values the way we try to as a brand, I actually think it can be for good.
John, you're seeing a little bit more risk than opportunity lately in your numbers. What are some things that you're showing?
Well, there's definitely a little more risk, but I think when you think about companies that have established track record, and Mark, we learned in our research that 82% of Americans, including nearly the same equal amount of Republicans and Democrats, trying to get them to agree on anything is kind of tough. They said that companies should speak out on social issues if they have an established track record, right? So if you walk your talk, and if you were already doing things, and so I'm thinking, Mac, about the community with NFL and the flag football and the discussions we had earlier here. I mean, this whole focus on inclusivity. I mean, the NFL. So many women are fans, and the Flag Football Initiative, I think, is a great example of just a company owning its values and sort of navigating the politics of the world by just focusing on really important things.
Yeah, they've done a great job with being able to include women, but actually building it up before they go out there and say, hey, look what we're doing for women. It's like, well, show us first. Show
Exactly.
us. Lisa, opportunity or risk?
I think it's both. It's important, I think, to partner with athletes who share your values, as Jennifer says. I think it's important to partner with partner with athletes that are going to be recognized on both sides if you are an organization that doesn't have a political stance. I mean, when I was at Farmers Insurance, we sponsored Ricky Fowler. He's just loved, right? And I actually have no idea what his politics are. He keeps that to himself, and he's just a loved golfer, and I'm so sad he didn't win on Sunday. But that's that was one of the things about him that was important when we chose him. Is his Q score is high. He resonates with people who aren't golf fans. He doesn't have a lot of risk associated with him, and you don't always know. Something can happen. Someone can make a bad choice, and they suddenly become risky. But at least you can look at them and where do they fit with your brand, and make an informed decision.
Mac, do you think athletes now are going to be as outspoken as ever, or do you think that they're going to pull back a bit, or what do you think is going to happen coming out of this environment?
That's an interesting question. I think Kaepernick is probably the most well-known athlete that's spoken out, and unfortunately, from a football side, it didn't go well for him. His career ended after going to the Super Bowl and all these things, so he clearly had the talent. But from a brand standpoint, it was great for him. He did amazing stuff with Nike and had the Netflix documentary and movie about him. So from that standpoint, it was amazing. So it's hard to tell what players are willing to do because I think in my mind or a lot of guys' mind, it's like if I stand up, I'm going to lose my football career, but am I going to get a movie? Am I going to get a deal with Nike that says, like, hey, he stands up for what's right? Because there were a lot of other players that were standing up. Kaepernick just happened to be the face of it, so he got all these things. But I think there's, like I said earlier, there's a role and that you play, and you have to be willing to stand up for some things, because in the future, football ends. You can't go and try to be a brand ambassador for things and then like, hold on, 5 years ago you didn't support any of this. What's the deal now? Did you just have a complete turnover?
Well, Jennifer, are you willing to write some risk and reputation insurance for Mac over here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got it.
Is that going to be a product that you offer? Do you offer that kind of product?
No, this is going to get really close. We do. I don't want to. It's life insurance, some of it, and it's life and disability. I'm getting nervous. I'm going to curse him. Now something's going to happen. I don't want to talk about it. We have our top 10 broker dealer, though. So if you would like investing in financials, it's not just insurance. I'm feeling like I'm going to curse you by saying that now.
I might have to go into this business. Could be an opening. So, but are you seeing in insurance, are you seeing any kind of politics coming into it? Politics in terms of the way you have to write policies and the way you have to sign people up?
I think it's nothing directly. I mean, we do a lot of work in Washington, D.C. around certain things that we think are important from health and wellness perspective as an industry. I think that, with different types of insurance, specifically with life, it's really mostly health-based. So what I do think that we see is that some of the coverage is just indicative to some of the diversity and some, the different health issues that just sort of run in that space, but it's nothing that's specifically called out. I would actually say the biggest place that we see a discrepancy or gap from being inclusive is with women. I mean, they tend to not have life insurance, and most of them are underinsured when they do get a life insurance policy written. So we spend a lot of time focusing on that for sure.
And John, any advice for athletes based on your research?
Well, I hope there's a lot of marketers here that are ready to sign up Mac. Mac, hold up your watch. Look at that. Can you tell the story about your watches?
Oh, yeah. So this is a Casio F91W. It's the only one I'll wear. So I have every single color, and every game since I've been in the NFL, I've worn an all-black version of this. I love them to death. I unfortunately will never be the guy that buys the expensive watch. Wearing a Rolex on the field and breaking it just hurts a little different than wearing the $10 watch and breaking it. So these are my pride and joy.
I think Casio needs to give you a call.
I'll happily answer.
All right, John, you're not getting out of that so fast, though. Okay, an athlete comes to you for a little polling advice.
Well, I think athletes are brands. The way that they're connected with companies, and like this panel's been talking about, is you're trying to find the shared values that work between the company and the athlete. And there's so many incredible examples of athletes doing amazing things for companies, clearly. And there's obviously some big misses, which creates significant risk as well. So, I think it's more, I would defer to my insurance experts over here, but I would do a lot of research, Lisa, like you talked about with Q scores, but to try to understand how the public feels about them. Or maybe there's a gap in what you're trying to get your brand across that athlete, she or he could provide. And so I think that's would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. I mean, it's matching the athlete with the brand, making sure it's authentic, making sure that the athlete actually cares about the brand and it's not just taking a paycheck, and that they can represent the values that are important to you.
John, is there an attribute that you think the most important attribute for an athlete out there?
Authenticity.
Okay. And do you think people know authenticity?
I think they feel it. They feel it in people that they've just met, like, meeting Mac, for example. But I think that what's so important is that, and that's in all of our data, Mark, like 8 in 10 people are saying what's behind you is what's important. The other thing, Mark, in the data that we're releasing shortly is we asked this sort of real simple, old-fashioned question. We said, trust, do you agree or disagree? Trust is old-fashioned, but it's now more important than ever, and it's 9 in 10 Americans. Again, I think trust is the new black. There's this big focus on trust being back in fashion because with AI and all these other things, existential threats, everything, focus for grounding. We want to be grounded in people and values that we can really believe in.
I always found when I was working with political candidates, which is a long time ago now, that authenticity was very dangerous because I would know when they were authentic and when they were sort of like putting on a face. And then oftentimes they would be authentic and they would just get trashed for being inauthentic. And then sometimes they were like, oh my God, I can't believe anybody's buying this. And everybody would come up to me, oh, they were so authentic today. So, I'm always a little wary of that particular attribute as a result of that experience.
Would you advise, like when you worked with President Clinton, if there was polling that said he should act this way, or Hillary Clinton, would you say go act this way, or how would you give them advice on that?
No, I wouldn't really give them advice on how to act. I just would observe sometimes that they would get very frustrated when they were called inauthentic, when they had actually been telling what they actually think. So authenticity is in the eye of the beholder.
Well,
Oftentimes,
Fair
it's just
point.
about what people want to hear.
But it's
Right.
also consistency, right? I mean, and that's anything. I mean, as someone who builds brands, that's one of the most important things: is you're consistent in telling your story. You're consistent in what you do and say and how you behave. And everyone within an organization behaves that way. And that's where I think people feel the inauthenticity is when there's the flip-flop or the changing ways or not following values and mores.
I absolutely. And so Mac, do you have advice for a new athlete about how they develop a brand? Because athletes do their work on the field, but it seems like there's a job off the field now too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at least when I approach a brand or a brand approaches me, it has to fit. And it kind of goes back to this authentic thing that we're debating about. If I don't use the product, if I don't really like the product, then I won't do a partnership with them. If Coca-Cola said, hey, do you want to do a partnership? And I don't drink Coke, or if I don't like their products, I don't want to see a fan someday and I'm not drinking Coca-Cola and they're like, hey, do you want one? I'm like, oh, I don't like that. Because this whole time I've built up this image of you should buy Coke because I like it. You should drink this because I like it. And now I don't like it, and it's like this whole sham or charade that I've just played. And I try to approach every brand like that. Like going back to the watch, like I've always worn this Casio watch. I'm not partnered with them at all, but I like Casio. If I show up in some other watch, then it's like, Mac, I thought you were the Casio guy. So being authentic with the brands that you choose, and not choosing a brand because they're giving you a better paycheck. Because I think long run, it pays off more to be who you are than it does to get a few pennies here and there to be something you're not.
Is there a medium you think is better or worse for athletes to kind of put their brand on?
I think that's a difficult question because I think it's starting to bridge where guys are getting into the alcohol companies, and you can't directly partner with them, but they get into that stuff, or there's a million different drinks. I try to get for me personally, with brands that not a lot of guys have, because I'm a unique guy. I don't wear shoes a lot of the time. I have snakes, and I don't eat vegetables. So I do a lot of weird things. And so the things that I like, I can't do. I'm not going to do the things just because everybody else is doing it, or I'm not going to just partner because two of my teammates are like, hey, they'll pay you and you should do it. And like, that's not what I want to do. So I think the medium that a player chooses is really going to be up to him, but it has definitely branched out further than just the Gatorade, the Nike, the Adidas.
Great. All right. No spinach ads from you, for sure.
No spinach. just beef, meat, and organs.
All right. So at Mass Mutual, do you use sponsorships much? Do you think that how they work for you in terms of being in insurance?
Yeah, we've actually had really good success with them. When we started 6 years ago and I did the rebrand, we started to work a lot in media. We bought a lot of sports because I just think that live sports is a really perfect place for fans and for brands to connect. And we, about a year and a half into that, started, we've in, I think, our 5th year now as a national sponsor with the NHL. And we had amazing success in that, in getting a new fan base, a new audience, recognition, awareness. It's not just about the eyeballs and the logos in the rink for us. We partner with them on our foundation, our community programs, and we do a lot of activation around their events and obviously business hospitality. And then Just this March, with the beginning of the MLB season, we became the official premier sponsor with the Boston Red Sox. So we have a 10-year deal with the Patch and basically taking over all of Fenway Park. And that's an opportunity for us to reach 24 million customers in audiences that we don't serve right now. So it's a lot of multicultural through baseball and diverse audiences. So we're super excited about it. It's a ton of work, but we see a really great connection. And I think, to what we were all talking about here before about being, why are you there in sports, is because I'm going to put my TV spots in those tent poles anyways, because we love the way people respond to sports. So those are two of our biggest sponsorship strategies. We do a lot with the different community organizations too across the country, but really love being invested in sports. Those are our big ones.
And Lisa, have you had any particular experience? I guess you've had several jobs, and I guess you're an athlete yourself, really. Yeah. Your experience with sports sponsorships.
Yeah, I've been involved in sports sponsorships most of my career. With Ring Central, we sponsor the Golden State Warriors. With Farmers, we had the Farmers Insurance Open. When I was with Pac Bell, Singular, AT&T, back in those days, we sponsored a whole slate of of teams and in sports. And I think, one of the things for me that's very, very important is that you're not just involved on the day of the game, that you're involved across many things, and you're engaging and making it more than just an activation in a stadium. It has to go broader, longer term, and engage not just your customers but other people. So with the Farmers Insurance Open, just because that's easy to go to, that's a 4-day event. But we did all kinds of charity events around it, and then we kind of activated on it year-round to engage with golfers, with golf, and try and bring it even outside of golf to make it bigger. We'd have Ricky Fowler in commercials. Again, that Q score, because he's liked outside of golf, made that work for us. I look at sports sponsorships as something that need to go outside of the sports arena in addition to being inside to really benefit a company.
Nice. All right, John, you're going to maybe close us down with just like one or two incredibly memorable statistics from your polling. Come on, you've got to give us a little edge here. The percentage that want to see sports sponsorships, percentage that don't want to see involvement in politics. I don't know. Give us a little something here to close us out.
Okay. In our Axios Harris Poll 100 this year, in the top 5 most respected companies, number 1 was Patagonia, number 5 was Chick-fil-A. And I would like to imagine those companies' corporate picnics that get merged together to see how that day would go. But the point is, 60% of Americans also say it's important for companies to show their values, even if I don't agree with them. And so I think it's back to that idea that you were talking about, Lisa, is like just the aspect of consistency. So whether you're a Democrat or Republican, in the middle, somebody can at least agree that they're being true to themselves.
All right. Well, I just want to thank you for the incredible diplomacy showed by this panel. They did not get into trouble while talking about very delicate topics here at all, and I think the future of sport diplomacy is in good hands, and the future of sports sponsorships, I think, going to be quite strong, even during this incredibly hectic political season. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That concludes our stage sessions here today at Sport Beach. We have more kicking off again tomorrow at midday. We're now going to set up for free play for the sports. So if I can